Here we are with another podcast from the Michigan Institute of Athletics in Brighton, Michigan. It's going to be a great podcast today. Actually, me and the guests were having a huge dialogue before the podcast, and I was almost like, stop. We have to save this content. This is good stuff. So right before I get into it, I want to shout out VetLife. VetLife is a 501c3 nonprofit company. It's a company of veterans for veterans. Every veteran faces difficulties when they transition from active duty back to civilian life, and VetLife is there to ease that transition. If you want to reach out to VetLife, you can do so through Instagram or Facebook, or check out their website at vetlifetoday.org. So without further ado, I want to introduce Alaura Harper. Alaura, I think you've seen some of my podcasts, but I start them all kind of the same way. I don't want to know about the woman that you are today. I want to first create your story. So I want to go all the way back where you were born and raised, what you were like as a young kid, kind of the defining moments or things that shaped you into who you are, and then we'll start to build this story into the woman that you are today.
Okay. I grew up originally in Romulus and really close to the airports, and my mom and my dad at the time were together, and my dad, the backyard, he currently has the same house now, but it was an acre-ish. So we pretty much were taking our shoes off, running out in the backyard, climbing trees, doing all the tomboy-like things with people on my dead-end street. That's kind of where I started. And then I ended up going and moving to Farmington Hills with my mom because my mom and my dad ended up getting divorced. And we ended up going there in a subdivision, which was a little bit different. I walked to school. I didn't take the bus. And
What age were you when you moved from Romulus to Farmington Hills?
I was 8. Yeah, 8 years old when my parents got divorced. And
Do you remember anything from that period of your life? Like, was that a difficult transition, or was it like just young enough that it was kind of just life and you were going with the flow?
no, I actually, in the beginning, my mother and father kind of they just weren't meant to be together. There was a lot of, when I was younger, my house was just one of the homes that my dad and my mom's friends just came to, and we all had these kind of cookout things, and we kind of just we all just kind of hung out. So I do remember that, and then when my parents ended up getting divorced, I remember it being hard. I remember the transition because I was close with my father, but then I was also close with my mother, so that was kind of hard so I pretty much remember a lot of that time when I was younger, for sure.
Was your father the one that was like the bring people together energy? Because usually there's it can be both, but generally there's one person that's trying to pull all the people together and make sure that, the neighbors could be there and the family could be there and the whole community, so then was that taken away after your parents split up? Was it your mother that was always facilitating having people in her life? Because I think that is a very influential part of childhood. When you are exposed to a lot of people, there's always energy around you. You develop a lot of skills that way. How did life change once your parents had split up, and who was the one that was always trying to bring the people together in your childhood?
Yeah, so the way my childhood kind of was is my dad was a part of this biker kind of situation where it was more like a family, and my dad, it's not like he belonged to any sort of anything. It was just he knew several people that was in that type of community, so everybody would come over. They'd bring their bikes over. I'd ride on the Harley with my dad. He'd pick me up from school. We'd have lunch. We'd do all that. So my dad is a person, I guess, that would bring the people, where my mom would be almost like that motherly caregiver person. That's when people came over, we would have the cookouts, and she's like, you want anything? Do you, that type of atmosphere. And then two, I was raised because of that type of, I guess, biker type. It was say what's on your mind at all times. You should never be offended for saying the things that you feel, and you should be able to have a conversation. And so if even really little, his friends would come over and, kind of say little things at me. And I would say, no, that's wrong because this. And then we'd have this conversation. And I think that that's also helped me and put me in a position to, where I am today, just to be able to talk about things and not really get offended or really embarrassed about the things that I think or feel. Or even if I don't know something, I'm going to ask the question and be able to have good dialogue.
So you basically found your voice at a young age. You found that, like, hey, you can stand up for being Alaura. You can speak your mind. You don't have to be afraid to challenge an adult or anybody if things aren't in alignment with your beliefs. That's a powerful thing, and that's definitely going to play into your story as we go. So as you go through school, were you in athletics? Was there anything in particular that was shaping you into being the person that you were? Was the damage of the split a big factor when you were growing up? Like, did you have to deal with a lot of, the struggles that come with that? Kind of help shape those like formative years for me.
So I had the opposite. I actually so my parents split up the summer of me going into, leaving third grade, going into fourth grade. So that first fourth grade year for me was fine because I was kind of transitioning. Fifth grade, got a little crazy, started acting out. My mom, I didn't have that dominant figure of my dad saying, hey, you can and can't do this. And my mom wanted to be more of a friend to me. And because she didn't really have too much of that growing up. So my mom's like, I want to be there for my daughter. Let's develop this friendship. And in return, it was great at the time. But looking back on it, I mean, it helped me shape who I am today. But I wouldn't want that for my daughter now. I'm a parent. I'm not necessarily the friend. And so I started acting out and I started, just not doing too many things, but showing up 2 hours late, when I was supposed to be home of the few hours before that.
No one was really going to hold you accountable, and your mom was just pouring love into your life, because if she was neglected from love, now she's going way further on the end of like, I just need to make sure that my daughter knows I love her and I support her. And sometimes parents go into like, my child can do no wrong, or like everything is okay, when like objectively a lot of things aren't okay. Not listening to your parents is not okay. And as a child, those disciplines and those consequences, they feel like they suck, and you're like, why do you got to be so mean to me? But they're so important to crafting a healthy human being, or helping them to avoid so many pitfalls in life, so many things that you will stumble into by accident because you didn't have the support system to say like, no, you're not doing that. There is a reason we tell you to come home at a certain time. There is a reason why you have to follow A, B, and C, right? So you start to go through those years, you probably run into some difficulties and some struggles, and if there's anything that was incredibly impactful that you think played a large part into development or shaping you, or any light switch moments where like you're making bad decisions, something takes place and you're like, you know what, I gotta stop doing this. Let's talk about that, and then we'll start to get into your high school years and kind of like what you thought was going to be next.
Yeah, so for me, I guess the light switch moment came way, way, way later. My mom actually, after I graduated high school, so we're kind of fast forwarding a little bit. I graduated high school and my mom was like, hey, we're leaving and we're going to Florida. Do you want to come? And I'm like, I'm looking for colleges. I don't want to go to Florida. My friends at the time, I thought were my friends. I'm like, I don't want to leave them. I don't want to uproot my whole life. So I said, well, no. But I had no idea where I was going to live. I had no idea what college I was going to go to. I knew I was going to go to community, but I wasn't sure. And then that was when my mom ended up leaving, and not having that friend ended up transitioning to me actually having to be independent and not relying on anybody else. And it's so funny because when you're in high school, when you're younger, you're like, oh, I don't have to do the adult thing. And then you get into that adult situation and you're like, oh, now what do? I have to pay bills. I need a job. I have to go to college. What just happened? So I think that was like kind of my aha moment.
And even though your mom had given you all the love and the nurturing side, she didn't set the foundations for success on that right off the bat. Like, you didn't have the accountability, the consistency, the being on time, the professionalism. You had to develop all that on your own. Like you said, you're kind of like sink or swim type deal. Hey, we're going to Florida. you can come with us and we can keep the same type of relationship we have, or like Alaura's going to have to figure this out on her own. And that's a big moment too, because for a mother that's pouring love in to her child, and obviously you're an incredibly important aspect of her life. Do you have brothers and sisters, by the way?
No,
Okay,
only
so
child.
you're the only child. She's moving to Florida. How does that work for her to just like, I mean, I guess you are 18 now, but just like, oh, I'm going to go on the other side of the country and like, good luck, kid. How does that work? I don't really understand that dynamic. But before we get, because we're going to start talking too much about after your high school career, when you're in high school, were there any relationships or friendships that helped, shape you, or were you on any sports teams? Was there anything unique about high school that you think was important to your development as a person? And if not, what did you think was next for you? Because like as high school starts coming to an end, everybody kind of gets that impending doom feeling about like, what am I going to do in this life? Like, had you started to consider career paths yet? Were you just taking it day by day? Did you have any vision in your mind? Do you have any dreams of what you wanted to do? Let's just talk about that period.
Yeah, so I did basketball, and I really love basketball. That was like one of the things, but I could never find girls to play with, so I'd always just play with the guys in like the backyard. So then I ended up getting on a freshman team, but because I was kind of going down that the wrong, I guess, path, that I ended up only doing it for my freshman year. So, and then I had a little bit of issues with the coach, and then that was it. It kind of all fell apart. So then I only did basketball. But one of the things that my mom had always taught me was, hey, if you get good grades, if you study hard, if you work hard, you can be able to have anything that you want in this life. So for me, I played basketball, and I had a little bit of discipline on that end, but everything else I was always a hard worker. I always wanted to just, if I can get all my stuff done, if I can be able to have fun and do the things later. So that's one of the things that I ended up being taught. Now, the career path, I always want to go in the medical field. I figured medical, that'd be something that was always around. I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I struggled with that because I didn't understand, how do I know what I want to go into if I haven't experienced it yet? If I don't know what medical is a really broad term. What in medical do I want to do? How do I know I like it if I've never experienced it? So for me, I was still a little bit confused, but I wanted to go into some sort of science, and I wanted to help people. That was one of the things that I loved to do. My earlier years in high school, I sought out a domestic violence nonprofit just for an extracurricular, and went out, called them, said, hey, what can we do for you? And went door to door, grabbed canned goods and clothes and raised a little bit of money and took it to them. And we did they ended up having like a walk that we ended up doing. So that was pretty cool. But I've always been thoughtful and caring of other people, based off my mom too, because my mom's always been like that, like always get the other person's perspective and the other person's story.
So you wanted to make an impact. Sure. There's two things I want to ask about here. I want to ask about, because you just said a moment ago that like I really love basketball, but something got you to quit playing basketball. And a lot of times coaches will hold you to standards and they will come down on you rough. And if you're not set up to handle those type of criticisms, they can hit so hard. And even if it is in your best interest, if the emotional side is telling you like, oh, they're this or that or that, that drives you away from it. The other thing is, it sounds like as a young woman, I'm picturing kind of a fiery young girl that although you're able to be a loner, you're not afraid to speak your mind because of how you grew up. You're not afraid to put your foot down. Did that make having relationships with other girls difficult? Because a lot of other girls don't have that same fiery nature. So if you have that and you're the one that stands out, they're kind of like, no, I'm not going to be friends with her. We just want to all kind of blend in together. Did you find it difficult to have relationships with girls? And I want to dig into further what got you to stop playing basketball? Because the first statement you made was like, I really loved basketball. Well, then something cut that string. Let's talk about that, and then we'll start to build your after school period.
What really happened was I because I had that friendly kind of relationship with my mom, she never really, I think because of my mom and my dad's divorce, she didn't want to really tell me no, or she still wanted to maintain that friendship. So I started smoking cigarettes when I was 12, and that's what ended up happening. However, when I was in basketball, I smoked. You could clearly smell cigarettes, right? Like when you walk into anywhere, you can smell smoke. And so I figured the coach, now looking back on it, probably smelled smoke. I looked like the type of person that was out doing no good. And so the coach came down on me a little bit harder, maybe not directly said, "Hey, listen, I know you're doing this, that, and the other," but instantly was pretty much like, "Nah, you can't. You don't belong in this type of environment." And so she pushed a little bit that was, would sit me out, would sit me on the sidelines, things like that, which I'm like, well, she must not like me. Where it really wasn't that. And so we had this back and forth, and I just said, you know what, that's it. So that's what ended up happening with.
Did you find relationships with women were difficult as a young girl?
I still kind of do, just because oftentimes the people who I surround myself with some women especially, they're more like peppy, more, "Hey, how's it going? Give me a hug." And I'm just personally not like that. So it does set me apart a little bit. Or and not just everyone in general. Sometimes it's about status and how you do things. And so for me, I'm very just kind of, I guess, tell it like it is kind of person. So for me, it's a little bit harder to be able to find someone who is kind of like me.
Well, and you're also just not playing fake. Like, you just need to find real, genuine connections, because there are tons of people, the person that you were just imitating a moment ago, and say, "Hey, blah, 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 blah." They're unfortunately a lot of the times the same person that talks shit about that person behind their back, and they're this, that, and the other thing, because they just put on a persona that's fine with everybody, but they're really not connected to that many people. Whereas you'd rather have genuine connections to people that you value, because you don't want to play a fake role to get acceptance. You want to be Alaura, and the people that like Alaura can be in your life, right? So it's just a different way of presenting yourself. I don't do that well either. One of my biggest character flaws is I have an incredibly hard time not showing when I'm around someone that I don't like. If I don't like their character, I don't like their actions, or I don't like, my fiance makes fun of me about it, because she's like, "You don't understand how bad it is. Your entire energy changes. The way you talk to them changes. The way you look at them changes." She's like, "Because everyone knows you for you. You're always you. You're you 24/7. So then at one moment, all of a sudden it's like, wow, like James must hate this person. But for me, and I tried to describe this to my fighters recently because I was asked about it, it takes zero energy for me to be who I am. I wake up every day as the exact same guy. I'm super excited about life. I'm super excited about challenges. I'm super excited about conversations I'm going to have. And when someone is around that I genuinely have a disdain for, it's because I either know something about them, or I've seen their actions that are damaging to other people, or I believe that they're not currently, not that they can't change, but they're not currently a good human being. So then all of a sudden, when I can be myself 24/7 with zero energy into it, now all of a sudden I'm around this person and I have to think about the way that I'm being. All of a sudden it's not genuine, it's not authentic, because I am holding a certain amount of man, this person, I hate the way that they treat people, or this, that, the other thing. I don't play fake well. It sounds like you don't play fake well at all, but that is not a bad thing. That is a very good thing. It's just, you have to learn the professionalism side, or the ability not to be like, "Yo, you're an asshole. Get away from me," because that just causes more conflict, right? And one of the last things before we jump back to your story is, a lot of the times the people that we do have a lot of disdain for, that maybe are the assholes, they need kindness more than anyone else. They need the world to be better than them more than anyone else, because when we go "Yo, you're an asshole," it just reinforces to them that the world is hostile, that they don't, that they're not liked, that they're not appreciated, and it makes them worse. But I just have such a hard time playing fake. I can't do it. So you're getting into high school, you decide to stay at home. You're gonna make it on your own, which I'm picturing the young, fiery Alaura, I'm gonna do this thing. What does that look like? Do you go out and get a job? Do you get roommates? How do you start to put the pieces together when the wing that has been covering you your whole life is now gone? It's going to live on the other side of the country. You're going to be going to community college. I'm trying to put this all together. Help me understand that period of life.
I was terrified, like everyone normally is. I've always had a job. I've had a job since I was 14. So that was one of the things I've always wanted to have my independence to a degree. But then the house was gone and all these other things. So luckily, my cousin that I wasn't too close with, but she's always been a constant in my life, said, hey, you can come and live with me. So that helped me out tremendously. So I stayed in her basement in like this little room. And of course, when my mom left, I had a cat and a dog. So I had to cart the cat and the dog in this like little room area. And of course, because I am so independent, I didn't want to intrude on her space. So I'm like, I would wake up, I'd go to school, and then, of course, because I was still living that lifestyle that I had been living, I'd go to parties. I would go to parties, sleep on someone's couch, wake up in the morning, go back to my basement, feed my dog, my cat, walk them, do all of that stuff, and then go back out and go to college. And then if I had a little bit of a break, I would go back into the basement, fall asleep, wake up, and then do it all over again. And that was life for a while.
Those were probably some of the most formative years of your life, though. There's probably amazing experiences in there, and there's probably terrible experiences there, but very formative years of your life. What do you think are the biggest lessons you pulled from that period of time? And then when do you really think you like start to get your shit together? Like you start to switches start to flip. You start to figure out like, this isn't good for me, or that's not good for me, or this isn't what I want. These aren't the people. When does that start to happen? So you can go in as much depth as you would like about that period of time, because I think there's a lot of lessons that can be taken from there. And then what starts, because some people get to that period and they stay in that period till their mid-30s, till their 40s, and then they finally have a midlife crisis and they're like, what am I doing? You obviously made an adjustment. You made a change, and you started to take your life a different direction for you to be where you are today. Let's talk a little bit about those times, and then what were like the big moments where you're like, okay, this is not it.
So with me, I was really stubborn. I was always told that you can drink as much as you want. You can have fun and party as much as you want, as long as you go to work on time, you pay your bills on time, and that you get good grades. So for me, that was life. That was what ended up happening. And I'm like, oh, I'm doing good. I have good grades. I'm good. Until I wasn't. And school was still good for me, but I knew me waking up and going, man, I kind of really don't remember what happened last night. What's going on? Kind of made it adjust for me. And I think my key aha moment that I realized I probably am going down the path that I don't want to be on was when I met my partner, Sean. So Sean and I met, we met in college, and he didn't drink. He didn't do anything like that. And so...
Wait. We got to capture all this.
Yeah.
We're getting all this, okay? First impressions of Sean, how the relationship developed, how it changed over time. I've met Sean. He's an amazing man. But first impressions, because he's probably so different than you, or you probably have certain similarities, but I want you to fully encapsulate from beginning until then all of a sudden you guys start going on a date, and you got to go into that. That's like some of the magic, because you found your life partner, right? So there's importance here. Let's get that.
So Sean and I we met at community college in a political science class, and we actually ended up being in a group for something, and we didn't really talk to each other at all. For one, the people who I've dated are tall, and they are just like big people. And sorry, Sean, but he's 5'5", and he's shorter, and he's not at all. And Sean actually, because the way I looked, he thought I was a lesbian. So he was like, all right, let me get, let me. There was no interest, zero interest.
You both weren't considering each other at all. You were just happened to be in the same group, but there was no he wasn't looking you as a potential girlfriend. You weren't looking him as a potential boyfriend. So the relationship almost got to organically and authentically grow.
Yeah, and it's crazy too, because I wanted somebody so bad in my life, to be able to have that companionship, that there was something that happened with someone else, and I just said, I'm over it. I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. So I wasn't even looking anyway. I didn't care. I had sweatpants, hoodie, my hair was all crazy, wild, and I didn't care at all. And so
And the universe had other plans.
yeah, and then so we finished out almost the remainder of the school year. We had one more kind of day where the teacher said, listen, I'm going to give you all of the answers kind of to this final exam for you to here's the questions, here's the answers. And Sean walks in 5 minutes before class gets out. So he walks in late, he sits down, pretty much gets out all of his things, class is dismissed. And so me wanting to help him, I'm like, hey, do you want help? Do you want these notes? He's like, no, I'm good. I don't want these notes. I said, okay. Are you sure? Because she literally gave us all the answers to the test. All you have to do is just kind of study it. Are you sure? No, I'm good. I don't want them. And then I'm like, all right, you should really take these answers. And I was more kind of like forceful, like you should really do this. So he said, all right. So he sat down. He's writing them down really quick, and we're kind of talking in between. And he's like, smoothest thing ever. He goes, so because I scribbled these notes so fast, can I get your number just to where if I have any questions? I'm like, yeah, okay, no problem, no big deal. And that was it. So then fast forward like a week or two later, he reaches out to me and says, hey, I really want to thank you because I passed the final. I wouldn't have been able to pass it without those notes. Thanks. Can I take you out to dinner? And I was in Florida at the time visiting my mother. And I'm like, no, just kind of like put it off. Because again, I wasn't looking for anybody. I wasn't interested. And I don't even think Sean at the time was really too interested anyways. That's just the type of person he is. And so we ended up, I ended up eventually going, okay, yeah, fine. We went to Fishbones in downtown Detroit, and we had a really great time. It was the best date I've ever been on. We ended up eating at Fishbones. We went to 7-Eleven, sat in the parking lot, watched window shoppers kind of go by, and Sean's hilarious. So he's like commenting on, people, and I mean, we're just laughing. And so we ended up going, just sitting in a parking lot and talking forever. Drove past his house. She kind of showed me where he lived, and I mean, that was it. But it was the best date, and we had substance to our conversation. So, and then once we started talking, it's incredible the difference between where my life was going and the people I surrounded myself with versus Sean, because he was so drastically different. And I didn't know that up until that point. I was 19. So to see a drastic difference is you don't have to go out and drink to have fun or to be confident. And that's what I was trying to do. So with Sean, he's like, let's go to the movies. I'm like, okay, we're not going to the bar first. We're not doing these things first. And he's like, why? Why would you? Like, let's go, let's have fun. So that's the drastic difference that Sean and I had.
So then you're in community college. Are you working a job at the time when you're in community college? What are you doing for work? You and Sean start to take off. Let's start to talk about as talk about that period, what you were doing for work, how you were getting by, and then when do you really start noticing that your life is changing, that you're changing, that you're growing apart from these old habits? And then how does that manifest itself in your life, in your actions, in your, experience, etc.?
I've done pizza since I've been 16. So I was always like, so when I was 14, I worked for the Detroit News and Free Press, knocking on doors, literally trying to sell paper to people. And then after that, my mom's husband ended up being a driver for a pizza place. He said, hey, I could get you in. Do you want to do that? Because I was waitressing. I had 2 waitressing jobs, but I wanted to do something different. So he said, hey, I'm doing this driving gig. You want to do pizza? So I said, all right, sure. So I was always in pizza from when I was 16 all the way until now, still in pizza. Never thought I would ever be in pizza, but still in pizza. So that's what I was doing.
So now what was it about Sean that really started to change you? And then as you two grew, did you have kids together quickly? Like, just kind of unfold life for me. And then, so you're in pizza, you're working in a certain store. I don't know which one it was. What is Sean doing for work at the time? What lessons are you learning from him? What are you guys doing together? And then build me to the point of like, because you guys own 2 franchise locations now. So there's a lot of gap that we still need to fill. Start to tell me that period of your life. Like, what was it about him that was really different? What was he doing for work? What were you learning? And then let's start to bring everything together to what we're at today.
So Sean ended up, I believe when I met Sean, he was doing production. He was a producer. He helped artists kind of write songs and do all of those things. That's kind of the background that he had. But before I met him, he was doing a lot of touring with a certain artist. So all of that extra money that he had, he ended up just kind of living off that. So Sean has 2 kids, and
what is the age gap between you two?
8 years between Sean and I.
So when you had met, you were how old?
19.
So you were 19, he was 27. Mm-hmm. Got it. So you got to see this older man that's a little bit more established, that has a career going, that's got some money built up. He's got these perspectives on the world that are so different than yours, and it's quickly shaping you and it's changing you. And so let's continue with this part.
Yeah, so with Sean too, I think him and I were both in a place where we both needed to grow, and Sean and I are such a yin and yang kind of couple, where he's more he's more laxed with his he's better at doing things on the fly, where me, I have to kind of have everything planned out. So when we mesh together, it's awesome. But if I try and do like his stuff and if he tries to do my stuff, it just doesn't work. So we kind of like mesh really well. So when Sean was, he's really good at showing me the other sides of things, and he's really good at being able to paint a clear picture. I was emotionally charged by certain things. So if certain things were said that I didn't agree with, I was emotional about it, because I was always kind of taught to speak my mind, which is great, but you have to be able to handle your emotions as well, and you have to be able to answer questions and things like that. So for me, I didn't want to hear some of the things that he was saying. So when we first kind of got together, he was like, listen, your friends aren't really your friends. The people that you surround yourself with, they're not for you, and the relationship isn't equal, and you want to find your equal. And I didn't understand that until it actually happened, where we ended up moving, and those people didn't follow me. They didn't care about me. And so I realized real quick, okay, well, I may have cared about some people. The other, they didn't really care about me. And he's right, it's not equal. And so that was kind of the main difference, that what really helped me see not only the drinking, the party, all of those things, but I didn't need it anymore, and those people weren't my friends. So that was one of the things that really changed me, because I went from having all these people surrounding me in my life that at the time weren't good for me, and then going just directly with Sean.
So you go through probably an incredible transformation at this period, because your emotions at that point probably, lash out, fire back. They are my friends. They're my blah, 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 blah. You'll see, da, 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 da. Because the emotion, that's how you feel. That's what you want to be true. But before this podcast, we were talking about the difference between what we want to be true and the truth. Like, the truth is what we should seek, even when it's painful. Even when you're like, damn, you were right? That sucks. But it doesn't suck that they showed you the truth. The truth sucks. But the truth is not meant to cater to any of us. We are supposed to look at the truth and then make decisions based on those truths. So if you have a group of people in your life that is not good for you, that is not good for your growth, they're not good for your spirit, they're not good for your future, you do have to cut the cord. You have to cut the strings. You have to allow a healthy separation, even if you want the best for them. Maybe down the road you're wanting, like, man, I hope that those people found happiness. I hope they got their lives together. Well, then that's a great lens to look back from. But that didn't change the fact that at that point in your life, they weren't great for you. And you have a man that's telling you that, and the truth often hits super hard. Like when someone says some outlandish shit, it just kind of bounces off. When somebody tells you a truth that you don't want to hear, especially if deep in your psychology you question whether it's true or not, that tends to be what sets you off. And it's funny because as you're describing your relationship with Sean, me and my fiance are the exact same. Like, I am the very all logic, very little emotion in my conversations. Very, I feel the emotions, but I completely detach from them when I'm making intellectual decisions. And she is very emotional and very how things feel but that's a perfect yin and yang. I think bringing opposing sides of things together is like real strength. Like when you bring, you know, emotional and the intelligence into one, you bring light and dark into one. When you bring all these things together, there's so much power in that. So your life transforms. You guys move together. You said you are now learning how to be a mother yourself, because as kids, are they starting to develop a relationship with you? You're probably learning how to be a mother to his children, or has he kept his kids completely separate? Let's start to go after that move. What does life look like? And then where does the idea come from that, like, we're going to become entrepreneurs together?
So Sean believed in taking everything slow, which was awesome because I've never done that before. So with Sean, when I met him, he had two kids. His daughter was 3 and his son was 6. And so for him, he didn't want me to meet them for minimum of a year. So I didn't meet them for a whole year because he wanted to see, is this going to work out? Am I the right fit to be able to meet his kids, which are the most important things in his life? And will we kind of mesh well? And so once the year happens and then I move in, I meet his kids. Now, one of the things that I didn't want to be, because it just ended up, I've always been around step parents, and those step parents weren't, they were kind of abusive and things like that. So I ended up not wanting to be in that role that is like, okay, I don't want to be in a mother role. I want to be more like Sean's the father, and I kind of help him with whatever he needs help with, but I don't want to overstep anything. And it's always been like that. And I think the best thing, there wasn't any expectation. There wasn't like, hey, Laura, you have to watch my kids Monday through Friday, and all of like there wasn't any structure at all to that. Sean's always said like, hey, if you want to do these things, you can. If not, there's also help that he has, and in a family that can help take care of the kids and whatnot. So that's just how we ended up doing everything.
That's
too.
really important, because he didn't put a ton of unfair pressure on you or responsibilities that you may not have been ready to handle, that might have completely shut you down or turned you into a person that you don't want to be. Or like, because I've experienced step-parent treatment growing up, that I didn't like my stepmother at all. I actually hated my stepmother, and when I look back now, it's through a different lens. There's a lot of forgiveness. I'm like, man, she's a young woman trying to figure out the world. Her life's a mess. Her mind is a mess. And yet she's thrown in an equation where she has to try to raise another woman's child. Like, it's difficult. But his, like, logical brain and, like, take the emotions out, intelligent analysis of a situation is like, I'm going to just present the options. If you want to do these things, well, then I want to support you in that. But I'm not going to unfairly put it upon you to, like, you need to step up and be this person. That's huge. So you two, is Sean still producing and working with artists at this point while you guys are living together and kind of like you have that family unit going? Or what is he doing, and then what are you doing, and then where does the idea come from that, like, you guys are going to go into business together?
So Sean ended up, I think he was doing something with the senior living. He was doing something like that where he would go in and take care of, he had one client, but then he was always still kind of producing. He found an artist, and he ended up, him and this artist still kind of work together off and on to this day. And so they were kind of working on these little projects and things. So Sean's always had side projects and trying to do stuff like that too.
So he's doing side projects. You're still working in pizza.
Yeah, I started, when I turned 18, I was a general manager. So that's what I did. So I went to certain pizza stores and rehabbed them, made them better, and then went to another one, rehabbed that, made it better. That's kind of what I was doing at the time.
Got it. What chain did you work for at that point in time, if you don't mind saying?
Yeah, I worked for Domino's.
Okay,
Domino's
so
Pizza.
You're working for Domino's. Yeah. You're going around. You're kind of, setting the cultures and, like, kind of revamping the stores to be at expectations, because you've been in pizza your whole life. You know how it has to operate. You're making a good living now with Domino's, or you and Sean combined, like, you're doing well at this point? You're starting to bank up money, and that's, like, the nest egg that gets you to the next level? Or how does that happen?
Yeah, so we ended up, the franchise was never the plan. I was still going to school. I think I was trying to get my associate of science. So I still wanted to do medical. I did not want to do pizza. If you were to ask me now, like if I would have ever done pizza, I was no.
So you were still on course to be like, yo, this is just a temporary solution until I get to what I'm meant to do.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. So I still wanted to help people. I didn't kind of understand how helping people in pizza really worked. It was like, oh, okay, you make pizza and that's it. That's all you do. So for me, I still wanted to do medical. I wasn't sure what that was. I kind of took like general studies to try to do that. And Sean and I were having dinner with somebody who then became the partner to be able to help us a little bit with Papa John's now. And we were all just sitting having dinner, and the idea was, well, if you're running a store and you're running multiple stores and you're good at it, why don't you just do it for yourself? And so Sean and this person are kind of talking about this, and I'm just kind of sitting there, and I'm like, no, there's no way. Immediately with me, I put things out of my mind that I don't think are possible. And that's something that I am still working towards to try and get better. And Sean's always been like that dreamer person where he'll say the most off the wall things, and I'll go, you can't do that because this. And he's like, why do you kill the idea? Why don't we just talk about it? Why is it impossible? Why can't we achieve it? And for me, I get caught in the planning of, okay, well, what's the first step then to this? And he's like, I don't know, but I want to do it. Why? So that's kind of how that started with going on the level of trying to figure out, okay, well, how do we get a franchise?
The similarities between your guys' story and me and my fiance is so hilarious to me as I sit here because we are the identical version of that. I'm looking at Mount Everest like, I'm climbing that. And she's like, we're not climbing that. I'm like, I'm getting to the top of that thing. And she's like, well, what equipment do you have? What knowledge do you have on climbing? And I'm like, these are all things that can easily be solved. Like, that's the least of my concerns. The question to me is the desire to climb the mountain there? And if the desire is there, I will trample any obstacles in the way of getting to the top of that mountain. But it's like, it's wild to hear how well that, and honestly, you grounding him, although it probably frustrates him to no end at sometimes, you grounding him back to, okay, show me tangible steps from your dream to real life, probably helps him take the vision and literally create a blueprint or a game plan, a path for you two to follow. And his dreaming and inspiration and wild, outlandish self-belief that you don't fully understand helps pull you to a level where you're like, well, if you can prove to me that we can do the first 5 steps, then fine, we can chase this dream. And that's a perfect balance together. So you have the conversation, the doorway gets unlocked in the mind. He starts going off probably the deep end, being like, we're going to do this. And you're trying to bring him back. Really help me understand how the ball actually gets rolling. What's the first couple steps where you start to believe, yo, we might get our own store? And let's unfold that part of the story.
Yeah, I think it was where when you general manage any sort of restaurant, it's a lot of time. Your phone is always going off. You're always answering people. You're always trying to train people, put people in like this, have them grow, be able to have the company grow. And so Sean would kind of say things like, well, if we had our own store, we could do this. If we had this, we could do that. And so for me, after talking about it, I'm like, well, maybe we can do it. And so that's kind of ultimately what ended up on the journey to doing it. So originally we were going to do Domino's because I've been in Domino's since I've been 16. However, there was another franchisee that covered almost the whole market in Michigan. So I was pretty much told like, well, you can move out of state. And I'm like, that's not an option for me. I don't want to do that. So there was kind of a lot of back and forth in between. And we said, okay, well, we can't do Domino's. That sucks. What else can we do? And then so that kind of set us up on the journey to do Papa John's. So what we ended up doing is we applied with Papa John's because you have to go through like this application process. And when we did that, we went to their headquarters. And we actually met with John, And he tries to fly in for any franchisee that was new at that time. He would fly in, he'd personally talk to him because he wanted to tell whoever it is, because oftentimes what happens is you have people, they have a reasonable amount of money and they want to go in, but they don't understand the operation side. So they just think, okay, I'm going to throw money at this, I'm going to hire this person, and it's going to work. And John was kind of there to say, listen, this is hard work. You have to be in your restaurant. You have to develop people. You can't just throw money at something and it's going to work. That's not how this franchise works. We believe in our people. And if you don't have that, then you can go to another franchise or whatever. And at the time you come in and he gives you like a Papa John's gift card to, try the pizza. And then he also paid for the hotel too, which was awesome.
So you got to sit with this probably billionaire who has launched a globally successful, franchise chain. And you're sitting there, you two now, from the woman that said, we can't do this, we can't do that, we can't. You're now sitting with the man that can absolutely give you the keys to the future that you guys are desiring. What type of impact did that make when you left there, realizing like that man took the time? That's Papa John. Yeah. You sat with Papa John, okay? He took the time to hear you, to hear Sean, to give you advice, did you leave feeling more capable? Like, did he inspire you to like, man, like this can happen? And then when you go back, like for someone that's never launched a franchise myself, what does the process really entail? What was the first period like getting it off the ground? And then start to build it up to, when does it really feel like it's coming together? What were the necessary lessons that you learned during the process that you didn't know going in that you were going to need? Because you probably thought to some degree, like, I know how to run a pizza shop. I've already done all this. Blah, blah, blah. But it was probably an entirely new level when you got to the, owner-operator side. Let's talk about that period from the meeting with Papa John to you get your first store up and running, and then at some point you decided to expand and you now own a second location. Let's kind of build that part.
So John is a very average guy. Like he's not like a businessman in the sense. Like he doesn't use big words. He just kind of sits down with you and he talks. And so for me, I'm like, this is an average guy that made a shit ton of money, right? Just opening up stores, starting off in a broom closet and expanding. And so for me that I'm like, wow, if he can do this and he is sitting here and he doesn't have like the business professional kind of sit down talk to you, throw a bunch of big words at you to show that he may be smarter than you or whatever. It wasn't like that experience that I thought was going to be going into it. It was like, here's the facts. This is what you need. Told a little bit of stories, told a little bit of jokes, and that was it. And so for me, I'm like, wow, this is a regular guy. He puts his pants on the same way that I do. And so now maybe I can do this. And I do have the experience. Now I just need the business side of it. And I think oftentimes the operation side could be a little bit more important than the business side, because you can be a business person and come in and have money, but if you don't know the operations of it, good luck. So once we ended up, so you apply, you go to Papa John's, sat with Papa John's, spoke with him, then you can figure out, okay, is this the next step? So once you do that, you kind of have a formal interview with a corporate official, and you sit down and you talk. What experience do you have? Are you able to do this? What type of capital do you need? All of these things. And we ended up talking, and the corporate official's like, yeah, you got the operations side. That's awesome. And then my partner was able to provide the capital and some of the business side to that too. And so we kind of, what they do is they say, okay, you're approved. Here's a 24-week checklist. And they kind of email you this Excel sheet, and you have to call these people. They don't do anything for you. They're like, listen, you're essentially leasing the name. You got to do everything. And at the time, I wasn't confident. I didn't want to pick up the phone and talk to random people. It was scary. And it was one of those things that's like, okay, well, where do I start? And my grandfather tells me this all the time. He says, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. You don't consume everything. He's like, you don't have to do the whole 24-week checklist. Start one by one by one. So I said, all right. So I picked up the phone, and that's kind of how it got started. And I realized the more I practiced, the better I became. The more questions that I asked, the more answers I received instead of not asking those questions. And I think the speak your mind kind of thing helped me out because I wasn't embarrassed to say, how do you do this? I don't know what I'm talking about. Can you help me? Where I feel like sometimes people don't want to show that weakness. And I didn't care. I said, I just want to open the store. What do I need to get there? And so that's how we ended up doing it. We actually ended up calling another franchisee who owned 5 locations in Michigan at the time. And I said, how do you do this? What's your struggles? All of these things, and kind of picked his brain. I think we were there for like 4 or 5 hours just talking about, yeah, I know how to do pizza, but I know how to do Domino's pizza. How do I do Papa John's pizzas? What policies, procedures, things do I need to follow to be able to set the business up for success? And that's how that got going.
So what timeline are we talking about? When did you launch your first store?
It's I always joke about it, but it's probably 9 months. It's like having a baby. So and then we signed up for 2 stores. So originally we had South Lyon. South Lyon was the first. And so this is probably 2014, 2015. We ended up opening up Papa John's in 2016. But we were signed on for originally South Lyon and downtown Detroit. That was the trade area that we thought we wanted. Well, the first time it was originally South Lyon and Milford, but then Milford, it didn't end up working out. So then downtown Detroit was it for us. But like you said, when it comes to thinking that everything could be easy, we start looking into downtown Detroit. And at the time, I mean, I don't know what rent is like now, but rent was crazy in downtown Detroit. And we went, that's a lot. How many pizzas do we have to make? Because that's ultimately what it boils down to. How many pizzas do you have to make to be able to cover your costs? And that was almost like, well, should we try something else? This is our first location. Maybe we try something else and then eventually circle back to that.
So now you have South Lyon and you have Novi. Once you had established South Lyon, you got that up and running, you've learned the lessons, you're getting it going, it starts to provide revenue that's supporting your family. Like, how long did it take to get to the stage where, like, you and Sean could live off that income? Or were you still side hustling? Were you still doing other projects? Or were you all eggs in one basket on South Lyon? And then when you went to open Novi, what timeline, like how much later did that happen? And how much easier was it? Because now you're going in with the confidence that you've built these systems, you've built these processes, you've asked the questions that were difficult. So let's talk about, how long did it take it to really get to the point where you're like, okay, we're doing this. Like, we are business owners that are making it, and then you decide to open the second location. And was it in your contract that, like, you had to open the second location by a certain amount of time, or yada yada?
So we had to open up a second location, I think, within a year. And so, yeah, and so when we jumped into it, it was like automatically like, you have to do 2. The problem with getting any sort of territory is you kind of get a traditional map, and they say, you want to try to put your location in the center of that map. Because if you put it on the edge of the map, there's no delivery area really or carryout area so much behind you. Everything's forward. And if we'll say, okay, you got your map, your location's at the edge, how long is it going to take you to go all the way down? And so we had to find real estate kind of in the center of our trade area. And so that was pretty difficult. We actually were supposed to open up, I think, on 9 Mile and Pontiac Trail in South Lyon, and we ended up opening on 10 Mile and Milford Road. And that actually happened by mistake. The guy wanted to get out of his lease, and it was another pizza place, so it was a little bit easier for us. So we ended up doing that. Well, then we have a year to do Northville. There's nothing in Northville. No real estate, no nothing, or at least anything that's desirable for us. And one of our things is that we wanted to get a prime location. A location, maybe B, but like a C location or anything that's just kind of pushed back, we didn't want to do. So we ended up, we only had a year. So we ended up getting the location that we're in now. But it was just cement, no plumbing, no HVAC, no nothing, just bare bones. And like what you were saying, I asked questions on my 24-week checklist. Those weren't the right ones for a bare bones kind of place. And then the other thing too is when you're working with contractors, the hardest thing for me, I don't know a damn thing about contracting. So I have to go in, I have to, kind of make sure that they're doing the things that they're supposed to be doing. And the contractor was awesome. He's built other Papa Johns, which was great. But I also don't know about the plumbing, the HVAC. So I have to ask a whole new set of questions. I have to be able to rely on somebody in good faith that they're going to be able to do everything they're supposed to. And then at this time it's, well, now we have like 8 months to open. And that's to get the plumbing and everything in the store. So it was like the time was ticking. So we felt that pressure. Whereas South Lyon, we didn't really feel too much pressure because it was already a pizza place. We just had to do a few little things. But with Northville, we had to do everything. And so that's what made it the most challenging and the most difficult. And I've learned the most out of that situation because at South Lyon, I've thought, okay, second location, this should be easy. I've already done this. No big deal. And then I'm like, I don't know. This is a whole set of different questions.
That makes sense. That makes perfect sense. And the way that you had to build it from bare bones probably taught you some amazing lessons for future scaling. Because the first time you fell into just a former pizza shop, that is a completely different beast than taking a store from the ground up and having to build it. So I think the way I want to wrap up this podcast is you've gone from a young woman that was kind of with the wrong crowd, that missed certain elements of development, but you have pulled all of the things in your life that have built you into the person that now is a franchise location owner for a mega corporation. And so you know the possibility that exists at all times for people. And I'm sure you try to bestow these lessons upon your children and things like that. But what would the Alaura that sits here today tell the young 16, 17, 18-year-old Alaura about life, about environment, about the people she surrounds herself with? Just like, because those are the lessons you're going to try to pass on to your children. Those are the lessons that you'll try to pass on to community or people that you care about. Or like I know Sean mentors people. He takes his life's experiences and the lessons that he's learned and passes those teachings on to others, and that's what unlocks their potential. What would Alaura say to the young woman that's a dreamer, or your daughter, Tommy? She's 15, 16. She's about to take on the world. What's the insight we give that young child?
I feel like that's such a loaded question.
It is. It's a powerful question. The way, like, your
Yeah.
life experiences have shaped you dramatically. They've completely changed your course. They've redefined who you are. They've taught you different ways to think and view things and be able to manage emotions and all these things. Can you encapsulate that into a couple phrases and sentences? Is there a basic message that you would leave for young people looking to accomplish their goals? Anything like that?
I feel like the biggest thing is you don't fail, you learn. And I think trying new things and getting out there and trying the things that you love, or trying anything, no matter if it works or doesn't work, I think that we shouldn't view those things. And I think society often views those things as, oh, you failed, you suck, you're the worst. And it shouldn't be like that. It's, how did you learn? What can you do differently to move forward and project yourself in the level of success that you want to have? And it's okay if you don't know what you want to do, try. And then if that doesn't work, try something else. And so I think that if I had to make it short and sweet, that's what I'd say.
That was a beautiful answer. That's what I was hoping for. I was hoping that you would just capture something with as much simplicity as possible, that just has like your self-belief and your willingness to just go on the journey. Because maybe you didn't have the self-belief or the answers or the things that you needed initially, but you found them on the path. You found them by going. You found them by probably stepping into some situations of discomfort and unknown and not being sure, being able to ask the questions that you needed to ask and feel, silly sometimes, but that's how you became successful. That is why you are a business owner. That's why you're carving your own way. So, final thing, your goals now, because you're successful. You have money, you run 2 stores, you could easily ride on this level forever. Is that your goal? Or is your goal to like, hey, we're happy where we're at now, we're just trying to raise our family? Is your goal to scale? Is your goal to affect the world in a different way? What are the goals that you have today as someone that's already made it to like a successful level of society?
I think being stagnant only hurts you. So we don't want to try to be just own two locations. We want to be able to be able to own more locations, to be able to have people grow. Actually, in the last 2 years, because I had a baby, ultimately that's been my thing that I've been most focused on. But then at the same time too, Sean has taken over both of those locations and has been able to try to scale it. We want to scale it. One of our things that we really want to do with our general managers is, if you want to become a general manager at our location, if you work hard, if you want to learn, if you want to get uncomfortable, we want to be able to partner with people. We want to be able to give them a store and say, hey, listen, this is yours. You've worked hard for this. Let's go to business together. And so that's one of the things that we plan to do. Sean and I have always talked, when we were getting our locations, we want to be able to have a date night and go to the stores and just hang out with people. Like that's what we want to do. We want to hang out, we want to talk to them, we want to inspire them, because I was answering phones, making pizzas, and I worked my way all the way up to this point. And I want people to know, like, that's a tangible thing. You can do that. You don't have to be in a certain area in your life. I mean, I came from humble beginnings, as they say, and I've worked through so many things in my life to end up to this point, and anybody can do it.
And that's an example of positive culture. That's an example of a culture that is trying to build up other people to their highest levels of success and help them towards their path to success and help them be able to live a life that they're proud of and thankful of, and not just suppressing them to the level of, like, you're this level employee, you better perform or we're going to fire you. You're trying to inspire, you're trying to elevate, you're trying to bring people up to the next level and provide a career instead of a job. And that's a phenomenal thing. The world needs more of it. We have crushed an hour of dialogue absolutely effortlessly. I think it was a beautiful story. I think it was very clear and concise. I think you've shown examples of, like, you can go from any one stage in your life to a drastically different stage if you're willing to go through the learning lessons and the progress. And sometimes you just got to jump and then figure it out. Sometimes you have to blunder into the wilderness and then, like, you find your way. So it was a pleasure to sit with you today. If there's anything else you'd like to capture on the podcast, I'm more than happy to. Otherwise, we'll wrap this one up.
Yeah, I just want to say that nothing is instantaneous. You don't get the instant. You need to think for the future and actually plan to some degree some stuff out. But it's not instantaneous. And I want people to also think that too. It took me 10 years to be in my position. And it's through hard work and dedication and being able to build my skill to be able to do this now.
You built the person that was worthy of the life and the success that you have now. That's beautiful. So thank you very much for joining me today, and we'll wrap this episode up.
All right, thanks for having me.